Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. So, yes, I cannot go back. Thanks for the reminder. So, it's interesting. Going towards the second last session, a lot of the stories I was planning to tell have already been told. So, there might be some repetition, but before we start, I think one of the things that I want to kind of get people's feedback and share my thoughts on is, why is security of things or securing the Internet of Things different than the traditional internet, traditional enterprise network? And the best way to really say why are we all here to discuss this new space is a story about, I don't know how many of you have heard about Willie Sutton. And a lot of the security folks use the story. For people who haven't heard, he was one of the FBI's top 10 wanted bank robber in early 1900. It's a very interesting story. I would encourage you to look up Wikipedia. And the urban legend goes as like, when he was finally caught in 1952, he was asked like, hey, why do you rob banks? The reporter asked him. He says, because that's where the money is. Then later in his autobiography, he says, no, I didn't say that. And I robbed banks because I just enjoyed it. And both of them are very interesting answers, because if you think about the anonymous example in morning from Josh, and if you look at the economics of how the malware industry has operated, between those two things, those are pretty strong reasons, either hacktivism or really for profitability, why Internet of Things becomes an increasingly large target. Same, if you look at the evolution of the security industry, it goes back, says people went for the PCs, and then cloud, which is becoming the new foray, and where the majority of the data is, the next piece goes to the security of Internet of Things. So that's kind of, I would say, starting the thought of this is a new space. All we are talking is the beginning. I mean, the attacks, the kind of attacks we have talked since morning are only the beginning. I'm going to talk about a hypothetical attack scenario as well in my presentation, and I'm going to go deeper into what we believe at Intel are some of the approaches to security, mostly at technology levels, not product level. I'm going to not cover a lot of products because we are yet to invent the products that will solve the problem space here. So with that, I think first things first, right? I mean, McAfee, a lot of people think of as an AV company. It's not an antivirus company only. We have a broad spectrum, network, embedded security, a large user base, a lot of people's. I'm not going to go through the entire fact finding here. But I think the big piece to take away on this slide is when you think of Internet of Things, and that is throughout my presentation, is Internet of Things or Internet of everything, and securing that needs to be at multiple points, right? Cloud, device, the communication between the cloud and the device, where the data resides, and you need to think of it holistically. I think that's a very important piece, and that's how at least we are thinking from a security aspect. So let's go back in time and look at the computing evolution. 1975 onwards and somewhere in the middle, PC computing. And I think the big thing, as you see this slide, from personal computing to internet to mobile computing and to Internet of Things, one thing that's obviously evolving is number of devices that are connected. The other important aspect which we are seeing the biggest change is anything which was not human interface device had a custom OS, was proprietary designed, right? Even if you look at the devices designed with VxWorks and Green Hills and whatever software back then, each device was very unique because that was really not an OS. It was a toolkit, and you can pick up parts of it, and the devices were unique in itself. What is happening is it's becoming commercial off-the-shelf OSs. Large number of Internet of Things devices, starting with Android, starting with Windows embedded form factor of some sort, or a Linux form factor. What that really does is, if people know how to attack a general purpose OS, they can get to every device. So the attack vector broadens with this trend of custom OSs in these devices moving to commercial off-the-shelf OS. An example is, VoIP phones is one of the things in Internet of Things. Most of the VoIP phones 10 years ago, earlier on, or even 5 years ago, were designed on some OS that they took from a Linux variant or some proprietary, totally proprietary OS. Most of the VoIP vendors now are saying, hey, I'm going to just go standard Linux. And by the way, if it is a VoIP phone with a user interface, might as well use Android because it has a fantastic touch interface. Why go something else, right? And there's examples across the airline industry panels, which you see the entertainment system in your plane. They're going Androids, right? Fantastic place to start, right? So I think, again, that commercial off-the-shelf OS is a very important thing. Same thing is happening with hardware, right? For driving low cost, use the benefits of hardware becoming increasingly powerful and building in graphical interface, connectivity, and all these things. They're just going to use the standard hardware. I can actually take a standard SoC rather than go spin up my own silicon. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be better. And next year, when the new silicon system on a chip comes out, I can just upgrade that piece. It's going to be backward compatible with the rest of the peripherals, and I'm done. So that also drives an important threat vector. And then connectivity, of course. We all know, right? And the challenge with connectivity is also, somebody mentioned in the morning, the protocols. The number of protocols that are going to be here. Connectivity is one of those things which is opposite of the first two things. That's going standard. Connectivity is actually going in the other direction, right? These devices are going to talk Zigbee, Bluetooth, IP, and whatnot protocols. And I think in some ways, each device talking a different protocol might be better for security because you break one, you're not breaking the other. But then it's a challenge because now you have multiple attack vectors, because some of these devices I was reading comes in with multiple interface to act as a hub in the house, right? So if it's a device acting hub in the house, it's going to talk Bluetooth, it's going to talk Zigbee, it's going to talk Wi-Fi. So you need to figure out one of those three so your attack surface increases. So these are some of the trends that are happening, and security is being affected by all these different trends. Let's talk about a hypothetical scenario, as I mentioned, right? Here's a gas station. An obvious thing is, if you look at it, each gas station has 87, 89, 92 octane levels. A simple one is, hey, what if somebody is able to switch the digital readers on octane levels and serve you 87 instead of 92, even though you press the 92 button? That's all electronically driven inside that pump. That's a problem. Your car engine gets affected. That's one hypothetical scenario. The bigger one, which I actually think is a very interesting, it's not far-fetched if you think about it. A lot of these gas pumps are now remotely monitored for the levels of gasoline in the underground tanks. And that electronic monitoring is driven by a sensor inside it with a central place, and then goes back to the cloud, which feeds back to the distributor, feeds back to the refinery, feeds back to the production houses. If you really think about that whole chain, and let's say somebody either hacks into the sensor or the central place, wherever in this reporting chain, and basically manipulates the levels across the country of where the octane levels is, even by 10% low or 20% low. Minimal, right? Which is hard to notice when you look at individual gas pump levels. You just reduce that the supply is 10% lower, right? Not the supply, the levels of gas is 10% lower. That will trigger a chain to the distributor, says, hey, we need more gas because our typical levels are at 70% when we keep it. Now it's 60, let's push more. They're going to send a signal back to refinery, says needs more, production levels. Suddenly what you'll see is over a month and a half here, you're going to see more production levels across the globe. Suddenly more tankers show up at the shore and says, here's more gas, just to realize there was no problem, right? And it could cause big economic impacts. I think the point here is, again, a hypothetical scenario that these systems which are talking machine to machine and triggering economic actions, they are in need of higher monitoring and higher security, because right now they are getting into the mode where we are automating for efficiencies, and very soon if you do not monitor these, this could be triggering a lot of economic impact. Again, hypothetical scenario. Another one is Stuxnet. I think people have talked enough about this. I'm not going to go here, but the key thing about the critical infrastructure, and I think I agree with the comments that some of the folks on the panel made, was it's very hard to monetize in the space. And this is where I think government needs to step up, is when we talk to our customers, the level of protection on these systems is extremely low. This is the industry where the highest number of Windows NT devices exist across the globe. They have Windows NT devices which are still connected on the network and accessible from internet too, right? Have not been patched, no security solution. So I think some of the reality is like waiting for a disaster to happen, and it's like that because economics doesn't make sense to upgrade or deploy security solutions. So I don't know what the answer there is, but big challenge. Retail, we all know. I think the interesting trend that's happening in retail, though, is the mobile e-commerce and some of the recent talks with customers, they're starting to design things with iBeacon where they will sense the presence of your phone and they know the data that you have purchased in past and push custom coupons and stuff to you. So the retail industry in the next 2 years, when it moves to a very, very custom served model, that here is the product you should buy when you walk into the store, and the coupons are pushed to you because they know exactly your location and presence, and Apple is doing a lot of work in the space. What will start to happen is the privacy will get to the next level of says now when that device is actually hacked, it's not the credit card number that's stolen. It's also about my entire history of purchase and my whole background of who I am, what's my demographic data and not. So the retail segment has not worried about a lot of that demographic data so far, but as they adopt that to do targeted marketing and pushing to you, the security concerns on that front grow as well. So I think this was the essence really is we think that Internet of Things is coming. I am pointing out actually it's here in a lot of different ways. Digital signage is another example. I can go on and on, but we're working with digital signage companies where these digital signs are connected to a PC sitting right behind the digital sign. And what is to protect that PC if somebody was to plug in a USB key? Nothing, right? I mean, full local access, somebody at night when there's nobody watching could do things to it. And there's damage, brand damage, what's being displayed on the airport and whatnot. So there's numerous examples here, and a lot has been talked in the morning, where the level of awareness needs to be increased, is increasing. But also I think the gist I'm trying to get to is you need to think security in a different manner. And I think if there's one thing is like security needs to be built in. I think that's one important thing. There's been multiple questions like, hey, as a CISO, I cannot justify the budget. I think my belief, and until some of the things that we are driving is build in the security as the device manufacturer and monetize it. I think there is ample opportunity as a device manufacturer to turn around security as a value prop. It might be hard, but I believe that can be done, security as a value prop. iPhone subtly has done that. I actually am a big fan. I'm an Android user, but I'm a big fan of how Apple built in everything from the ground up, and they never talked security, but everything is just there for you. You never worry about a security solution in that space. So I think before we go further, right, and this definition is very much overlapping with what Mark presented from Cisco. Few things to highlight, right? Connected intelligence system, we believe it's managed, it's connected securely, and also about the data. I think the important aspect is a lot of these devices are collecting very sensitive data and a lot of valuable data. Some of these devices themselves might be totally dumb. An example is if there's a sensor in a manufacturing plant, let's say a cola manufacturing company plant, it's detecting the acidity levels inside the tank, whether the recipe is going fine or not. It's collecting a lot of this sensor data. By itself, it's not making any decision. It's just collecting data, sending it back, and then taking signals back that I'm connected or not. It cannot maneuver anything. The risk in those environments when it's just collecting this data lies at the back end, right? So those devices you can say, I don't need to worry about them much because they cannot do harm back as far as they are integrally reporting the data back. I think from a end user perspective, few things happen is actionable information, very important. I think we see the only way you should define the intelligent device is it's collecting something that's useful data. And then you can actually add value-added services on top. I think this is the world we are yet to see where these devices start to deliver value-added services on top. And there was a discussion sideline there, is like, can we monetize these value-added services? Will there be a freemium model? Who knows? But I think there's a space where we are beginning into the space. We never thought that the cell phone service for homes could go as cheap as Ooma has been able to do, or Vonage has been able to do, taking Pacific Bell and other companies by surprise, all the VoIP revolution that happened 8 to 10 years ago. There might be models like these that happen here. It's just the initial services, basic, and then there's value-added services engaged. So what do we believe from a security perspective in the space? I think, as I mentioned, need to look at holistically. We actually believe the security model here is incomplete unless you take the entire thing into picture. In fact, part of my job is embedded security or Internet of Security. The other part is data center security. And what I am seeing when I talk to analysts and customers is the public and private cloud adoption is growing. Every year, the industry beats the estimate of the analysts, right? So if analyst says, oh, there's going to be $20 billion in spend of public cloud, the next year come back and says, no, I think it's going to be 25 billion. We were wrong. And then it's gone up for the last 2 years like that. And a major reason is Internet of Things, right? I mean, a lot of this public cloud usage that is being done is by application being built for the devices that are connecting back. It's not the user clicking in the internet, right? Nest-like application, Dropcam-like applications, a lot of these applications that are being developed using the public cloud. So important to think about that security. Securing the intelligent devices, that's the third aspect. Securing the connection, apps, data, and traffic, very important aspect. And then I think I referred to this in the morning. We believe that it needs to get to a point where you have certain common security standards. I firmly believe that every device manufacturer should have a checklist. I don't know how strong a standard that is. It's like they should have a checklist. I mean, why should a default port be open on a device just because it was in the base OS, VxWorks, or WinRiver Linux, or whatever OS is? Why should a telnet port without a password be open? And it is there. I mean, if you run any scans on these devices, it's there. You find it in a lot of systems. So basic checklist and a validation of these things going on, either adopted by the device manufacturers or a third party to enforce, I don't know which one, is needed to make this place, this new model secure. So let's talk a little bit about cloud security. And I think there is a little bit of a division from what people have talked since morning. We have done a lot of pieces on how this new model is evolving. I think this cloud security model is not very different than what you need if you're just running a SaaS application which an end user uses with a browser, with one exception. And the one exception is on the rightmost side, which is endpoint-aware integrity. I'm going to talk about that. But if you look at, basically, when you look at internet and how internet users, and when I say internet, I'm saying somebody using a browser to interact with an application, they're using the model there as digital certificates, tell you whether the website is secure or not. There's reputation of website. So if my browser is trying to go to a site that has malware, there's enough tools to kind of say, hey, it's a bad website. Google Chrome has features. Independent companies like McAfee have solutions, and Symantec has solutions. Then there is private and public cloud security solutions, whereas how do you maintain the integrity of the server? How do you maintain the integrity and tell that this particular application should run in US geographical zone, only run in US geographical zone, and there's enabling solutions there. There is VM integrity solution says making sure my virtual machine is booted up fine, and so on and so forth. One of the important aspects that I believe is going to become important is when a device connects to the cloud, it needs to tell its integrity, says, I'm so-and-so device, now give me the data. How do you know whether that device that's asking for the data is not a rogue endpoint? Can you use username and password for that, which is what we have used in our internet world? Not really, right? I mean, username and password models will not work in this because each device cannot have a unique password. Digital certificate model might or might not work. If you go to client certificate models, maybe that's it, but who manages the cert? How do you distribute the cert? So that is a very interesting problem. And to be solved, I think there is a lot of hardware-based trust that can be built in. So if you can use things like TPMs and some of the standards coming out of trusted TCG, where the device can say, I'm so-and-so, this is my hardware identification ID, and the cloud says, okay, I know you. Based on your hardware identification ID, you are a Honeywell device, and you are entitled to this data, right? That will say, in this new world, I cloud trust the device, and the same way back, right? Client, the device trusts the cloud as well. That is an area of new innovation which will be driven. Other areas are existing solutions morphing into the Internet of Things, where you will need the network IPSS for the network protection. You'll need the endpoint solutions like whitelisting to protect the OS stack and other pieces. But this new place where it's not a human who can have a user and a password, it's a device, it's going to communicate, and it needs to authenticate itself before it gets the data. That is an important area. When you look at the device itself and securing, there is 3 different technology areas. One is device hardening. I'm start with the bottom, device hardening and management. So how do you make sure that the device itself is not compromised at a firmware level, right? Most of, if you just go look at how traditional devices have been attacked in the space, a lot of them is, hey, I upgrade the firmware with a malicious firmware. How do you make sure that nobody can upgrade that firmware? Software update is secure. This, in the morning, the keynote, the point was, how do you have manageability to every device out there? And I think that is paramount. I mean, that message is loud and clear. I completely agree with that. These devices need to be managed in some way. Now, is there a console management? Maybe not, right? I mean, management does not mean you need a central management console where you push updates. Management means there needs to be check. How do you update the software? How do you validate the software when it reaches the device? Can the device ask somebody, either a cloud, a management console, or something sitting next to it, or a hardware module, I don't know what, but it needs to ask, is this software good for me? Should I take it? Did the software validate a hash which was supposed to be with an independent authority? And then if somebody wants to push some update to it, it could be pushed. Very important, at least in the enterprise Internet of Things or industrial segment. In the consumer, the model might be different, but I think there also you need a software management piece, very, very important. So that device hardening and management becomes a key. Boot level and OS level security is another important piece, which is how do you make sure the OS stack is hardened to a point where it boots up and the OS is not compromised. Again, a lot of it needs to come from the hardware. We are not there yet. It's like, if you look at it, right? I mean, rootkits with the physical, so anybody with the physical access can compromise most of these devices because there is no username and password. There's a well-published way to get to the management interface. You guys have seen those Coke vending machines which have multiple variants and they have 200 different selections of software drinks. If you want to get to the management console there, the technician doesn't type in a password. You go to the, I'll tell you how it's done because it's well published. You go to the water. So you go back, click water. I just want water. And you see these the back wallpaper has a bunch of bubbles. And there's 3 bubbles that you touch in a certain order, and it drops you into a management console there. Okay, that's all. And then you can manage it completely, the levels of different drinks and what you want to replenish, and you can connect back to the console. It has a full, and it's running Windows underneath it. So my point is, there is a big challenge. These devices, it's not, I'm not blaming Coke, right? They cannot have a password on this. If they have a password on this, guess what? It's going to be a shared password because they do not control the network who is managing it. They do not control the network who's distributing this and setting this up. That is where I think you need to come to a model where the device can trust the software, device trusts itself to the cloud, and then the other piece is what can you do with this interface up, which is the data protection and which is the application level protection. Is like, yeah, you drop into the management console, but you can't do anything till you put in a hardware key or you have a client certificate till you have this for the next level of maintenance. So I think at the highest level, again, for the device level security, you need to think very differently. The username and password models don't work. You need to get to a data protection and application protection, OS level protection, and then how do you do the entire management of this infrastructure. So those are the three different categories we have looked at. When you translate both the cloud and the device security pieces, there is these 15, maybe more, right? I mean, this is just top of mind, different technologies. The other problem that we have retrofitting the security industry into security of things is each of these technologies have existed as products in the enterprise space, right? You cannot have 15 different products sitting on this device, which is this tiny, power sensitive. So you need to take the pieces of technology that make sense. There is a question, will there be specific security companies emerging here? I absolutely believe so. Because if you try to take an encryption solution that is designed for your PC, try to throw that onto your printer, it doesn't work, right? And it doesn't work for multiple reasons. One, because the hard disk there is very different than the hard disks in a PC. Two, there is no user entering the password every time the system boots up, so where does it get the key from? Can you leave the key on the device? No, the key needs to be on the network. Where is the key in the memory? A whole bunch of different use cases, right? Similarly, identity protection, I mean, what is the identity here? The user identity doesn't exist. The user doesn't log in, but there is a device identity. So if you look at these technologies, all these technologies need to be morphed to the device use case. At the highest level, I'm not saying there'll be 4 million different types of solutions because there are 4 million different types of devices. But you got to dissect them as, hey, I have an end consumer device, which is a read-only device, like my Pebble watch right here, which basically does no action at all. It's a read-only of notifications coming from my phone. What do I need on this? All I need to make sure is it's a one-way transfer of Bluetooth data back in here, and that's about it. So even if I lose it, it's losing some notifications. If it has privacy information and the application's developed to that point, I need a lock wipe capability into this device. That's about it, right? I don't need anything more than lock wipe on this. On my phone, I need username and password. On the Nest on the device, I need more security. So I think you can categorize these devices into consumer use cases, and these are the 3 different bands, and then pick up these security things. Key ones I will highlight here, which every device manufacturer should absolutely think about, is secure update. Very, very important. I think this goes back to the management discussion this morning. I mean, if one thing we are sure is every device will be vulnerable, whatever solutions you put out. Question is, how do you update when it is in the field? Whether it's a car, whether it's a gas station, whether it's a pump in a nuclear plant of some sort, how do you update it in a secure manner, in a validated manner? I think that is very important. There is no one product in that category. It's not like, hey, take BigFix and it solves your problem in this world. But secure update is a big problem. How do you validate who's the update person? And some of this might be just build it in-house if you're a device manufacturer. I just need these 3 things. But think of these as building elements and build the solution that's appropriate. So what are we doing at Intel, McAfee, and Wind River? I think I'll start with saying, fundamental, if you were to ask me what is the Intel strategy or vision, I think secure by design. Traditionally, Intel Security or McAfee has been selling solution to the enterprise for things that have been made, right? I mean, we have never said, hey, take this application assessment solution and do this, right? We say, hey, you have an IT infrastructure, deploy this. Here we actually believe you need to build it ground up. So some of the work we've been doing is working with Intel, Wind River, and McAfee together to say, here is a stack, and you customize it, but it comes with the hardware, the OS which uses the hardware capabilities, and the security solutions which uses the OS and the hardware capabilities, and customizes to your heart need. We will give you it as a stack based on the use case of the device, use one or many of these features, including secure update, including secure boot, including whitelisting capabilities, hardening your device and whatnot, but being able to offer it for the sole goal of secure by design. And I think that's the mantra that we are trying to follow. So key things, again, innovative in terms of hardware, software solutions combined. This needs to be a very different world. I think differentiator is, of course, being superior in functionality and other pieces, but also we believe this world needs a different approach. Comprehensive, again, we firmly believe the tie-in to the cloud and the device is needed. Without that link, we will not be able to secure this world. Otherwise, one point of compromise can easily compromise the other thing. If the device is secure, you go to the, it moved on its own. We need to go back. Can you go back? So I think I'll just, on this slide, last thoughts is keeping the infrastructure secure, protecting the workloads of the OS, and then compliance requirements. I think across these, the compliance standards will evolve. I have in my past role, I have sold compliance solutions. I think compliance is one of those things where in this specific area, just like any new industry, compliance solutions take time to evolve. And it'll take 5 to 7 years, like what does actually NERC really mean for this new type of device that was just made, right? There is no antivirus for this. So if PCI has an antivirus requirement, what do you really mean for that, right? What does that mean? And that's okay. I think compliance requirements come when they come and the industry adopts to that, but from securing from the scratch is very, very important. So one of the products that we introduced based on these principles and this design philosophy was what we call an Intel Gateway solution for Internet of Things. And the idea there was, how do you secure the existing device infrastructure, the brown field as we call it. There's devices out there. There is critical infrastructure out there which is already there. So we have recently started offering a stack which has Quark chipset from Intel, McAfee, and Wind River, all in an integrated solution to be able to give the device manufacturers a full stack with hardware root of trust, firmware secure boot, secure updates, whitelisting for making sure the device runs what exactly it needs to run, all in a single stack, and then you can go develop any gateway solutions outside of that. So again, focused toward people who want to build devices and solutions from ground up in a secure manner. And that's one of the pieces that we offered. It's a joint solution from Intel, McAfee, and Wind River. And with that, I think I'll close that the biggest piece that we see here, we have a very large customer base. One of the other examples I will quote, which is a very successful use case and case study which we have done in past, is printers. There was a talk about in the morning, what's printer security? So we worked with Xerox a couple of years ago. It's been 2 years almost when we launched in joint solutions. We looked at Xerox printers. What do they need from security, encryption, hardening? And they offer a Xerox secure solution with McAfee and Wind River solutions baked in. Very interesting space. I think we are yet to learn a lot in this new space. One thing, again, if I have to reiterate and take away, is in this space, we need to think secure by design rather than come back to it and secure the world. And our traditional solutions might only solve a part of this problem that we are yet to see. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Rishi? I have a question for Rishi. So as we're, as we're looking at, again, as you said, population of billions of devices, all different use case scenarios, all different platforms, how, and you're coming, obviously McAfee's roots are in antivirus and threat detection. Where do you see kind of the early, how is Intel and McAfee going to get kind of, what are the first steps that you guys are going to take to secure this next generation of devices? Because obviously there are incentives, and we've heard this today, there are incentives on the producer side to kind of keep costs low, keep overhead low, have power constrained devices, and not necessarily put a lot of resources towards security. So how do you kind of both bake that in? And then behind that, if the management layer here is a cloud-based layer, right, as you were saying, is that Intel's cloud that you're running on behalf of a lot of small device makers, or is that something that you leave to another?
Yeah. So two questions there, right? So really, the second one is the cloud, and the first. So I think this might sound like an Intel advertisement, but I'll talk to it. So the solution so if you think about it, I think Intel is in a very unique position, having an asset which is hardware asset, Quark in the space, and Atom in other areas. Then Wind River, which has been a very strong OS vendor in the embedded market, and then McAfee, which has been a security vendor. So the question about cost of building a device securely is a paramount one. Our way of addressing that is, you're going to buy the Quark hardware anyways. You will get the OS and security with it. And that OS is not a monolithic OS that comes with this and use this. It's a toolkit, right? So I think the approach, and we have got some very, very positive feedback from customers, is here's the stack that we recommend you start with. The stack is connected, managed, and secure. And you should not sacrifice on any one of those three pieces because of either cost of buying additional components or while you're building the device. I mean, enabling security, if you look at, without getting into the details of the solution, is like, it's a last step. You have built your device, just lock it down, and it will make sure that this is the set of software it runs on it, and nothing else runs from a whitelisting approach. It's just the last step of building the device. And you cannot afford to avoid that one step if you want a secure device. So making it simple, integrated, and then the capabilities there from a bundling pricing perspective. So we are saying, hey, take the software stack. If you're going to do piecemeal, then it puts the onus back onto the device manufacturer to make sure. So that's one. Cloud, I think we do not. Intel does not have, here's the cloud for managing these. Nothing in near future that I can share here.
Saying, here's the stack. It includes management as a component of that. That's something that...
So the management stack includes components like ePolicy Orchestrator, which is McAfee's management console for those security pieces, and then management capabilities, which Wind River builds in for secure updates.
Okay.
So that's what secure updates is what I call management. Now, the larger cloud solution, I think, when I pointed the slide, between Intel, McAfee, there is a lot of cloud security assets that we have. So if somebody is building a cloud, we recommend use it with the Intel TXT and these McAfee solutions and so on and so forth. We don't have a cloud offering to go do that.
Questions?
Any other questions?
Nobody wants to ask him about the 0 day on the soda machine? I mean...
That's actually fun. We have one down in the cafeteria, and every time there's a visitor, I always show them, it's like, hey, you want to switch between cola and Fanta? That'll be a fun trick.
Which drops do you press?
So it goes clockwise at an equilateral triangle. So there's 3 dots. Make an equilateral triangle clockwise starting from the top.
Sophisticated, yes. Who figured that out? I want to know.
I think I read it somewhere online.
What developer working late night?
Yes.
Okay, Rishi, thank you so much,
Thank you very much
for speaking to us. That was great.